Today's headline is The Great Destroyer, How the Vice Presidents of the United States Died. The subheadline says, The Deaths and Funerals of George Clinton and Elbridge Gerry Many Years Ago. William R. King's Death, Henry Wilson. This article was written by Karp in the Cleveland Leader. It says, the first vice presidential death was that of George Clinton. It took place here at Washington, and his death was the first occasion of the great destroyers entering the high offices of the government. He had been the vice president for nearly 8 years, serving one term under Madison and one under Thomas Jefferson. Beginning life as a sailor and a privateer, he had been a brigadier general of the Revolution, a member of the Provincial Congress, and for 18 years, governor of New York. He died at Washington on the 20th and was buried here in the Congressional Cemetery on the 21st of November. In 1812, such a thing as keeping a corpse for weeks was unknown in this country, and both Gerry and Clinton were buried the next day after their death. The time Clinton died, Washington City contained under 10,000 people, and the funeral could not have been a very grand one. The body was taken on its way to the grave from the city to the Capitol, and here a rest of half an hour was taken. Thence it marched onward in a martial parade. A company of militia preceded the hearse, and the 8 pallbearers who carried the coffin from the hearse to the grave were all Revolutionary soldiers. The Senate attended in a body, and on their return to the Capitol, they resolved that the Vice President's chair in the Senate chamber be shrouded in black during the session of Congress then assembled, and that each senator should wear mourning in the shape of a band of crape on the arm for 30 days. Death of Elbridge Gerry. The second vice presidential death occurred 2 years later, and Madison's administration showed the curious coincidence of 2 vice presidents dying during its continuance. Mr. Gerry had presided over the Senate on the day preceding his death, and he ate breakfast at Mrs. Wilson's boarding house that morning as usual, saying he felt well but had a slight oppression of the chest. After breakfast, he walked out to do some business at one of the government departments. He had gone but a short distance when he became indisposed and took a carriage to return. When the carriage reached his boarding house, he was found to be insensible, and on being taken from it, he expired without a groan or a sigh. This was between 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning. The Senate at once adjourned, but the House continued its session, though it adjourned for the funeral the next day. The funeral took place at 3 o'clock, and from the Intelligencer of that date, I see that the Reverend Obadiah Brown pronounced the funeral service. Gerry was buried like Clinton in the Congressional Cemetery, and though in his day he was one of the greatest men, not a dozen statesmen in this capital city have seen his monument or know that he lives here. He was a graduate of Harvard College, a delegate to the Continental Congress, a signer of the Declaration, and one of the makers of our Constitution, though he refused to sign it. He had been several times in Congress, once governor of Massachusetts, and also minister to France before he was elected vice president, and his whole career had been a most stirring one. During his early days in Congress, he narrowly escaped from the British by hiding in a cornfield when a body of troops captured the house where he was staying and were searching for him. He was the first to inaugurate as governor of Massachusetts the present political system of redistricting a state's congressional district for political purposes, and it's from Elbridge Gerry that the term gerrymandering comes. Vice President W.R. King. Vice President King did not die in Cuba, as some papers state. He was in Cuba for his health at the time of his election, and had resigned from the Senate sometime before on account of ill health. He had consumption, and at the time he was sworn in before a consul in Cuba, he did not expect to live, and had to be prevailed upon to take the oath. He was too feeble to stand alone at the time, and had to be supported while it was administered. He sailed for America, and grew worse during the voyage. When he landed in Alabama, it was evident that he would never get to Washington. He died the day after he landed. The departments were not closed here in honor of his death, and he did not have a public funeral. He was the first bachelor ever elected to one of the 2 highest offices of the nation, and he had long been a senator, having served for more than 10 years as president pro tempore of the Senate before he was elected vice president. Like Hendricks, he had been a member of a constitutional convention of his state, and he was elected to his first term in the Senate during the year in which Vice President Hendricks was born. He was for 30 years a United States Senator, and had 24 years of continuous service there. In addition to this, He served 5 years in the lower house and 2 years as minister to France. He was 6 feet tall and very erect. He was a good talker and was probably the great reminiscence man of his latter days. Henry Wilson's last hours. The last vice presidential death, before that of Hendricks, was that of Vice President Wilson, who died here in Washington just about 10 years ago. He had been sick for some time, and in New York had had an operation performed in which his spine was seared. Returning to Washington after the operation, he indiscreetly took a warm bath in the Senate bathroom. This weakened him, and his system did not recover from it. He was taken down sick at his boarding house, and shortly afterward died. His death occurred at 8:05 o'clock, Monday morning, November 22, 1875. The cause was set down as apoplexy. The death of Ferry had occurred the day or night before, and his friends had deferred telling him of it until the last moment. As morning went on, and the time for the newspapers to come approached, it was seen that it would be impossible to keep the news from him any longer. He was told of it, and was greatly shocked to hear it. 15 minutes later, he was dead. This story came from the great state of Montana, being reported in the New Northwest of January 15th, 1886. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.